Welcome to this episode of the Voices for Voices TV show and podcast. I am your host, founder, and executive director of Voices for Voices, Justin Allen Hayes. Today, our guest is joining us in studio, and the topic, we're going to touch on a couple different topics. So this is going to be part one so episode part one, and then there'll be a second episode to follow next week that you'll be able to catch. But this episode is going to be around substance abuse, the ramifications, consequences that can come from that, and then our second episode will be coming full circle of how our guest took her experiences, plural, and is coming out on the other side and now helping others. So we'll get started and welcome Kelly Nagy to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. Starting, like I said, at the beginning, grew up in kind of a normal fashion.
Yeah, so I grew up, I would say, in a very normal childhood. I had mom and dad still together. My father passed away, but they were together my whole childhood. I was the oldest. I have a sister that is 1.5 years younger, and then I have a brother that is 4 years younger. We grew up in Bedford. I did sports, I did band, I did fairly well in school. Mm-hmm. A lot of friends, in the area. Was back in the time when you could actually go outside mm-hmm. and play and come home when the lights came on and all that good stuff. To my knowledge, none of my friends or anything ever had an issue with like smoking or drinking or anything like that. Mm-hmm. We grew up in a very sheltered lifestyle because back in the late 70s, early 80s, you didn't hear a lot about addiction. You didn't hear a lot about people with mental health issues, substance issues. I mean, we had a very, very normal childhood, which was amazing because nowadays, people are raised by grandparents or by sisters or aunts or whatever. So mine was very normal. I graduated in 1991 from Bedford High School and went on to Kent State. I was going to do meteorology, and then I went to early childhood education and, had a great life.
Yeah, and I think that's good to know for our viewers and our listeners that even myself, of sometimes having assumptions of, well, things in a negative light start very early, that they can happen at any point, and as we'll find out in a little bit, how that really resulted in that addiction. What did you want to do, I guess, when you finished school? What was the thing that said,
my goal was, I remember sitting in my guidance counselor's office when I was 16 years old, and they give you that question, what do you want to do the rest of your life? And at 16, you have no idea what you want to do.
Correct.
So I'm looking out the window and I see the sunshine. I'm like, I want to do the weather. I want to be a meteorologist. Yeah. And so that's what I went off to school to do. I'd always loved children. I had babysat, I had nannied. So part of me wanted to teach preschool also. So once I got to Kent State and realized you needed more science than I thought you would need for meteorology, I just wanted to be on TV.
Yeah.
I went back and I continued early childhood education. My goal, I wanted to do preschool or pre-K was my specialty. And so about 20, 21 years old, I'm like, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. The rest of my life is teach.
And I know one of the big things that individuals throughout the course of life run into is those fears in public speaking and being in front of the camera, in front of a group of people. how did that come easy to you, or can you explain to somebody who might not?
Yeah, so for me, growing up, when I was in 4th grade, they had this great theater program. It was called Kids on Broadway. Okay. And you had to be 4th grade and up because you had later night rehearsals and stuff, and they figured that was an okay age to be out past 9 o'clock. Okay. So for me, being in front of people and playing another part came very naturally, because pretending to be somebody else versus yourself sometimes is a lot easier. Yeah. So I didn't have a whole lot of trouble with public speaking at that point in my life. I guess my advice would be just have fun with it. Be confident. Nobody knows your lines, like in theater, or what you have to say. Never let them see you sweat, and if you make a mistake, just keep going. So for me, it's just, confidence. I had the confidence when I was younger, and that has really helped me for my job today and just moving forward with everything.
And I think that's helpful in any line of work, is just be confident, be yourself, and not to really worry as much what others are going to think, because even the most successful or well-liked entertainer still has people that don't like them. So I think that's something to really is helpful.
I always say my life got so much simpler when I stopped caring what other people thought about me. I'm like, I like myself, and I like where I've been, and I like where I'm going, and I'm me. So if that doesn't fit into your equation, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, excellent. So we can transition to, you got married, had your first son, Phillip, and the anxiety that came with it out of it. I don't know if you had panic attacks prior to that, or if that was...
We look back when I was younger, my mom and I, because I'd always been an anxious child. I always feared going to school sometimes because, oh my gosh, what if I felt sick, or what if this happened? So I was always an anxious child. And I remember at a very young age, my mom had me talking to a counselor. I think it was somewhere in Solon, actually. I didn't care for it. I felt very uncomfortable because it was an older gentleman who at times would say things that weren't very appropriate to a younger girl. And so told my mom that we obviously nixed that counseling. And so for me, I'm like, every time she would say, let's try somebody else, that fear was in my head. So I got married. I had my son Phillip. I was finishing my master's degree for education. And all of a sudden, I started getting these feelings, like my heart would beat, I'd be sweaty, I'd feel nauseous, and the feeling would not go away. Like, I really thought I was having a heart attack or something, which turns out it was anxiety and panic attacks. So I went to my doctor and told her what I was going through, and she recommended Xanax for me. Now, I had no idea what Xanax was other than take a pill, it's going to make you feel better. She didn't educate me on, don't stop taking it, it's very addicting, none of that. So, it said once a day, blah, blah, blah. And I took it. Never once did they say maybe you should see somebody, or maybe there's other solutions like exercise or whatever that looks like. So for me, I was doing exactly what my doctor said to do. And, it worked for maybe 8 or 9 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
It is. I functioned completely normal. I knew I had that pill if I needed it. Unfortunately, your body builds up a resistance to a certain dosage. So then they upped the dosage to it. Kept taking it. And then I had my second child, Jack, when I was 26 years old. It went away a little bit because, you have this new child, but then postpartum depression came into play. And I went back to my doctor and I said, hey, this is what's going on with this. What can I do? That's when they switched me to Klonopins. So Xanax is fast acting, takes care of everything, where Klonopins kind of keep you even keeled throughout the day. So it gives you that same resolution. It just lasts longer. For me, that worked great. I never had an issue with it. Took it the same, functioned absolutely normal. One thing I'd look back on is the emotions were frozen. Like I would why am I not crying at this movie, or why am I not super, super happy? Why don't I feel that emotion? And I never understood that until when I became sober. You learn a whole different thing. But I always tell people, I said, so my drug of choice came from my doctor. Should I have asked more questions about it? Should I have talked to the pharmacy more about it? And I always say, you only know what you know. And what I knew was to take this once a day, don't stop taking it, follow up with your doctor every 6 months, and go from there. So I was educated on it, but not educated enough to maybe prevent this addiction.
Yeah, and panic attacks, I think, and anxiety, I know for me, kind of came out of nowhere too. And some people close, some people not so close, they would say, oh, you just need to go for a walk, you need to do this, you need to do that. Just, Google what to do if you're stressed. And can you just talk about how the panic attacks, that they do last? And I like to equate it to, in my mind, take the most nervous you've been as a person, and it doesn't go away. And it's kind of like 24/7, where it's just you're at this peak level, like you said, heart rate's rising, thinking you're a heart attack. Myself also ended up in an emergency room thinking the same exact thing. And I think that's helpful to just explain the panic attack, how you went from not having them to when you had them, that, like you said, you're always at that, oh my gosh, level.
Yeah, so even though I was taking the Xanax and the Klonopin, I would still have them because that's not like the end all for stuff like that. So I remember any little situation I would go into that wasn't home, I was already in my head, oh my God, this is going to happen. And when I was at work, it happened. And when I was teaching, it happened. And I would try just to let the feeling go without really noticing or making aware of what was going on to other people. It would stay and it would just consume, everything over me. I would try to breathe. I would tell myself, like, this is going to pass, you're okay, and stuff like that. And sometimes I could get out of my head, and other times I could not get out of my head. For me, I didn't want it to interfere with teaching. I didn't want it to interfere with my kids, because at this point I have a son that is middle school. My son Jack, 7 years younger, is in elementary school, and I am that parent that would volunteer for this and carpool and all that good stuff. And so for me, setting up a routine so I know what was happening every single day worked for me. Did that prevent them? Absolutely not, because I was still on the medication, but it helped me mentally, like, okay, this is going to happen next. This is going to happen next. But then I'd wake up in the middle of the night and have them. At one point, I was staying at home, like I didn't want to go out. What if this happened there? And for me, exercise helped to an extent. I've always been a runner since I was 13 years old, and I could go out and run maybe when that feeling was coming on. But when you're in a classroom or you're at a kids event, you can't just be like, hold on a minute, panic attack, I'm out of here. You can't just go out and run. So I didn't learn tools to deal with it until later on in my life. But at that point, breathing, trying to talk myself out of it, know it's going to be okay. Those were the best things I could do at that point, and some exercise.
Yeah, and I catch on when you mentioned, when you stopped worrying about what other people thought, that was huge for you. When you were, I'll say, starting the Xanax journey and the Klonopin, could others notice that in you? Did notice that you were taking some? Did they ask you?
So yes and no. Yes and no. I thought I was being as normal as possible. The Xanax phase, my family knew I was taking it. I had some friends who knew I was taking it. Obviously, my employers, I had to, because they drug test. And if something came up like that, I wanted to them know, you have your prescriptions so they can see it. But as I moved along through the Klonopin phase, I started drinking.
Okay.
So I would go out with a group of friends, and I'm that girl, I'm very competitive. So if I had a shot, somebody's like, I bet you can't have two. Bet. Now I have two. Now I have four. And I remember going home some nights, like, how did I even get home? I remember coming home one night, my son Jack is sleeping. It's like 2, 3 in the morning, and I'm walking in to make sure he's okay. I'm trying to be okay for him. And I thought, thought this was normal, mom coming home this late and this is fine because she's always up the next day teaching or whatever that looks like. But I believe the more I got into that addiction in my mid to late 30s, the more people started to notice some behaviors changing. I wasn't as reliable. I was always tired. I was a little more irritable, because of that, because I was tired. I thought overcompensating to volunteer and all this, nobody would notice. Nobody noticed. But when I look back, I realized I was there, but not there, if that makes any sort of sense. I was just kind of walking through all the steps of life. And when I got arrested, my family was like, we could tell something was wrong because your behaviors changed, your mannerism changed. Even though you tried to act normal, you weren't normal.
Okay.
Yeah, but the drinking, definitely, I'm not a drinker by trade. I hate alcohol. My dad was an alcoholic, and I'm like, I'm never going to drink. But when you are under that addiction and you try something else, you're just going to go, overboard. I never did anything just under the radar. It was always big.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that sounds like me. I used my competitive spirit and some of the bad ways as far as drinking more, and I had overdosed on taking quercetin pills. I ended up taking 32 because I was like, oh, you're taking 20, so I gotta up it, and it gets very dangerous very, very quickly.
It absolutely, and you do things you wouldn't do. Like a couple circumstances, I remember I was out at a bar one night, and I remember waking up the next day like, why is there salt in my belly button? Oh my gosh, what happened that night? Or another occasion, I was driving, and it was just 25-mile-an-hour road, and I think I was going home at the time, and I was really close with this one car, and I bumped into it. And I remember the cop coming. He's like, well, have you been drinking? I'm like, no, and I actually wasn't at that point. I wasn't drinking that day. And I'm like, yeah, the squirrel was chasing the cat across the street, so I had to avoid that. He looked at me, he's like, so that's what happened. I look back now, I'm like, I'm sure that's not what happened. But in my mind, that's what I saw, because you have all these images. You think you're never gonna get in trouble. You think nobody's gonna touch you, you're invincible. So I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, did I actually believe that? The things that come out of your mouth. I remember once I went to my mom's to pick up my younger son. She's like, Jack's not here today. He's still at school. No, Mom, today's Wednesday. He goes to Grandma's. Kelly, it's Tuesday. Oh, so I went to the school. That's how they could certainly tell things were not normal, because I used to be on top of everything. And, slowly but surely, that world was colliding on me, and it was scary.
Yeah.
It was scary to feel out of control. But for me, at that point in my life, that was normal. Okay. That was normal, yeah.
And I think that's the thing to key in on it is kind of these new normals come into play. What was normal 5 years ago or a year ago? I mean, we know we're going to evolve and change over time.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about whether it's substances or what have you, that when we, like you said, once you start added drinking to taking Klonopin, and that just became, that was the new normal. Like, okay, if I'm going to go out, this is what we're going to do. I can't drink water. Like, I'm with friends. I'm at a bar.
I have to fit in and everything. And I was still taking everything the right way. I was still going to my doctor every 3 to 6 months, and they would evaluate me, and is this still working? No. They'd up it, and still nothing as far as maybe you should try this or maybe you should try this, nothing else offered up. And I remember asking once, like, do you think I need counseling with this? Or is there another way that I can get through these panic attacks or depression without being on medicine? Well, this is what's working for you right now, so let's not, mess that up. I was like, okay, and my, I think it was Giant Eagle was my pharmacy. And after a while, they're like, should you still be taking this? And I'm like, well, my doctor said I should. Right. I didn't know you could doctor shop. I didn't know you could go to different pharmacies and get prescriptions filled. I had no idea, because where I grew up, none of that ever happened. Nobody ever did anything like that to my knowledge. So it was just very, very interesting the way this all played out. And I look back at that journey and I could be like, Why did you do that? Why did you do this? All this stuff. But that's my story. That's part of my life. And my younger son, it affected the most because with my drug using and with my drinking, I started stealing credit cards. I started writing bad checks. I started stealing identities and stuff like that. I obviously wasn't very good at it, but I started being like, nobody's going to notice this. Nobody's going to tell on me. And the thing is, I didn't need anything. I didn't need money. I didn't need all the stuff I thought I needed because I had a good life. I was married at that point, and that person was working nights, days, so they were so oblivious to what was going on with me. It was probably my youngest son, because he was still at home, that noticed it the most. And, Jack, I'm going out tonight. I'll be back about 2 in. Okay, Mom, I'll check in with you. Okay. He'd cry himself to sleep. I never knew that until I was on the other side of addiction. You don't realize at that moment how many people you are hurting when you're doing your thing. So,
regarding doctors, was this a psychiatrist or a general practitioner? Because that's what I ran into for the longest time. Of the general practitioner, I'd always went to for physicals, and so I thought that's just okay. If I'm feeling a certain way, I get an appointment, and I didn't know about the specialization so much. Can you explain maybe a little bit just how that was for you?
Yeah, so when I was in my 20s, after I had my first child, I went to my general practitioner, told them what was going on with me, and that person is what started recommending my Xanax and Klonopin. So as I move forward in life, I would just always go back to a general practitioner because that's who's giving me this stuff. I never thought about a psychiatrist. My sister is a psychologist, and she explained, psychiatry can recommend medications, but a psychologist cannot. They're just there to listen to you. So I took it upon myself to go and start talking to somebody who I interviewed, who I felt comfortable with, who was a female, because after that one experience I had, I was just like, yeah. So, but I would do that, and I would still take the medication that my doctor gave me. And when I was talking to this lady, explaining to her about the medications, she was okay with it because it came from a doctor. It didn't come from any other place. So, and the more I got to know her and started talking to her, and life was starting to crash down on me from my stealing and all that kind of stuff, she was like, you might want to go to a psychiatrist. You might want to talk to your doctor about getting you off of this stuff. All these different things. And of course I didn't listen. I'm like, nope, I'm talking to you and I'm doing this. I am doing the right thing. And I think the beginning of the end for me was in 2014. My dad had cancer, and we knew it was going to eventually not be a positive thing at the end. He decided at one point to go from quantity of life to quality of life. So he was at home at the end with hospice. I mean, they were fabulous. It couldn't be any more of a positive experience for a very negative, outcome. But that night when he passed away, I forgot to take my Klonopin. So I'm thinking the next day, you double up like penicillin or something. And then I'm like, oh, 2 feels better than 1, and that was the beginning of this downfall that I had. Now I'm running out of medication. And back then I thought I had the flu every month. I didn't know that was detoxing. You only know what you know. And I would wait to go back to my doctor. So for 2 weeks I had none of this stuff. I wasn't sleeping, I was sick, I was agitated, I started calling off work and everything. And, going to friends' houses and, oh, there's some money. They won't notice that's gone. They won't notice that's gone. They're not going to tell on me. And it just started to snowball in my life. So,
and I think we touched on you had a bad experience with a counselor. I think it's try to think of the words. But yeah, if you're going to talk to somebody and be as open and honest and upfront with them, you want them to kind of get you. Like, and there's times where you just need to vent, that you can do that. And then if you don't feel comfortable, look somewhere else. And I think that's hard because I know from my experience, like, oh, I got to explain this again. can't they just look into the records and see, and I think that can be scary, as well as if an individual is transitioning from the general practitioner to, say, the psychiatrist, or more specialized, that sometimes it takes quite a while to get in. Yes. And when you're, especially as you explained with the panic attacks and the different things going on, you feel like you're dying right then. Yes. And it's like, I can't wait 3 months to get in. And that's what landed me in the hospital. And I ended up going that way. And it was a lot of money, even with insurance. And if I would have known some of the things I know now, then I would have started the journey a little bit earlier.
There's a saying I use a lot: you only know what you know. And all I knew was what my doctor had told me. Now, when I was seeing the psychologist near the end, before everything crashed down, I look back and I wasn't being honest about everything. I would give her details of my life that were positive. I would throw in a little bit of the issues that I was having, but I would blame somebody else. I wasn't accountable. Well, I took that money because they owed me money. Or I opened that credit card because they told me I couldn't use this one anymore, so I'm just going to do my own. I mean, I was babysitting a family at the time. Something came in the mail for a new credit card. Oh, well, they'll never know if I fill it out with my information, you know, and I was so dishonest. But I wouldn't tell my psychologist all of that because I didn't want her to look down on me. And maybe if I was more forthcoming or more honest or anything, maybe my outcome would have been a little different. But now I'm so transparent with everything. I don't leave out a detail, and sometimes we're probably like, you could have left that out. I'm afraid to because of my past experiences. And being accountable today but not accountable then has changed my life too.
Wow.
So.
Well, we're at the end of this segment, so thank you for joining us, Kelly, in studio. We'll pick up for our viewers and listeners, part 2. You can check that out next week, and that episode will be circle around kind of the crash and what events and experiences happened then, and then the full circle of helping others and how that makes you feel and inspire others. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you, our listeners, our viewers of our Voices for Voices TV show and podcast, for all the support that you've given us, and we really appreciate it. So come back and join us for part 2 next week, and you can also check out our YouTube, Apple, anywhere you get podcasts, streaming content. You can get one of our 144, 145 episodes. So we're just continuing on, and with that goal of mine of wanting to help 3 billion people over the course of my lifetime and beyond. So with your help, I think we can do it. So until next time, I am Justin Allen Hayes, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, and please be a voice for you or somebody in need.